The morning began like any other, soft sunlight pouring through the curtains, the hum of distant traffic mixing with birdsong. But Maria's peace shattered when the phone rang. She picked it up, her hands still damp from washing dishes. "Good morning, Mrs. Ramirez," a cheerful voice said. "I'm calling to confirm the flower arrangements for Saturday's wedding." "White roses, correct." Maria frowned. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "What wedding?" The florist laughed politely, as if she were joking. "David Ramirez and Jessica Flores, ma'am. The event at your farm." For a second, Maria thought she misheard. "My farm," she whispered. "Yes," the man said, still cheerful. "It's going to be a lovely ceremony." Maria hung up before he could finish. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She stood frozen in her small kitchen, her apron still tied, the smell of coffee lingering in the air. Her son, her only son, was getting married. On her property, and she hadn't even been told. Slowly, she walked to the window overlooking the garden. The soil outside was still dark from last night's watering, the mango trees swaying gently in the breeze. This was her life's work, her pride. Every brick of the farmhouse, every blade of grass, she had built it all with her own hands after her husband died. And now her son had turned it into a venue for his own wedding without even asking. The betrayal hit like a slap. 4 years, Maria had lived for that boy. She had cooked, cleaned, and sacrificed everything so he could study, find a good job, and live comfortably. She'd endured Jessica's sharp tongue, her constant reminders that Maria was just old-fashioned. And still, she smiled, swallowed her pride, and told herself it was worth it. But this was too much. A cold anger began to grow inside her chest. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls and confusion. One by one, vendors started calling. The caterer wanted to know where to store the food. The decorator asked if he could start setting up the arch in the garden. Even the DJ called to confirm his equipment delivery. Every new call twisted the knife deeper. Everyone seemed to know about the wedding except her. They were using her address, her property, her name, without her consent. She could almost hear Jessica laughing with her friends, bragging about their rustic outdoor venue, pretending it belonged to them. Maria sat down at the table and stared at the land deed framed on the wall. Her name glowed back at her. Maria Ramirez, sole owner. She traced her finger along the letters, feeling the rough texture of the paper beneath the glass. "This is mine," she whispered. "Mine." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Years of obedience, years of silence, years of letting others step over her. Suddenly, all that patience cracked. The florist's cheerful voice echoed in her head, followed by Jessica's dismissive tone, and she felt something inside her snap. No, she thought, not this time. Not again. She tried calling David, but he didn't answer. She left a message, soft, controlled, polite. "I heard about your wedding, David," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Please call me back." But the phone stayed silent. He didn't call. He didn't text. By afternoon, Maria knew the truth. He wasn't going to. They had hidden it from her on purpose. Maybe Jessica thought she'd embarrass them, or maybe they wanted to avoid paying for a venue. Either way, it was betrayal. Plain and cruel. Maria made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window as the sun began to set, the golden light spilling across the floor. She remembered David as a boy, his laughter, his tiny hands gripping hers, his tears when he scraped his knees. She had loved him more than anything in this world. But now, looking at the horizon, she realized something painful. He didn't love her back in the same way. To him, she was just an old woman, useful when needed, invisible otherwise. She sipped her tea and felt the bitterness spread through her mouth and her heart alike. Then, quietly, an idea began to bloom, small and dangerous, like a seed buried deep in dark soil. She didn't know what it would grow into yet, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let them walk over her anymore. That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Every sound of the night, the crickets outside, the ticking clock, seemed to whisper the same thing. They used you. Her heart hurt, but beneath the ache, there was a strange thrill, a spark she hadn't felt in years. She got up, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and went outside. The moonlight bathed the fields in silver. The farm looked peaceful, untouched, waiting. "This is my home," she murmured to the stars. "No one will take it from me." She thought of all the times she had said yes when she wanted to say no, all the times she'd been quiet to avoid conflict. Maybe she had been too kind for too long. Maybe it was time to remind everyone who she really was. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time in her life, smiled not with love, but with resolve. The next morning, she decided she would not confront them with tears. She would answer betrayal with intelligence, with dignity, with control, and maybe, just maybe, with a little revenge. The morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen table as Maria sat with her cup of coffee, staring blankly at the steam rising from it. Her mind was clear now, sharper than it had been in years. The anger had cooled into something stronger, purpose. She knew crying wouldn't change anything. Confrontation would only make her look weak. But there were other ways, smarter ways. The world had taught her to endure, but it had also taught her how to think. Her eyes drifted to the old landline telephone on the counter. With a deep breath, she picked it up and began to dial. "Good morning," she said when a man's voice answered. "Is this Golden Events Company?" The man confirmed politely. "I'd like to rent my farm for a private event this Saturday," she continued calmly. "A corporate gathering, around 200 people. Can you manage that?" The man hesitated. "Saturday. That's short notice, ma'am." Maria's voice didn't waver. "I'll pay double." The words rolled off her tongue with the smooth confidence of someone who had already made up her mind. "You'll find it's a large property with gardens, a barn, and plenty of parking space." The man's tone instantly changed. "We can arrange it, Mrs. Ramirez," he said eagerly. "Can we come this afternoon to inspect the place?" Maria smiled faintly. "Of course," she replied. When she put down the receiver, she exhaled slowly. For the first time in days, she felt alive. There was a strange thrill in taking back control, in knowing that the power she thought she'd lost was still hers. She spent the next few hours cleaning the house, not because she expected guests, but because it calmed her. Dusting the shelves, wiping the windows, watering the plants. It reminded her that she still owned this place, that every inch of this land belonged to her sweat and sacrifice. Around noon, a silver SUV pulled into the driveway. Two men in crisp shirts stepped out, their shoes gleaming in the sunlight. "Mrs. Ramirez," one of them asked, offering his hand with a professional smile. "I'm Diego, event manager from Golden Events." She shook his hand politely and led them through the garden. The men admired everything, the wide lawn, the wooden patio, the small pond glimmering at the far edge. "It's perfect," Diego said with genuine admiration. "We could set up the stage here, the dining area there, and maybe a photo backdrop by that big mango tree. You've taken great care of this place." His words warmed her heart more than she expected. For years, she'd heard only criticism from Jessica, complaints about how old-fashioned the house was. But hearing a stranger praise it filled her with quiet pride. "Thank you," she said softly. They walked back to the porch, where Diego took out some papers. "If everything looks good to you, we can finalize the contract today." Maria nodded. "Let's do it." The transaction took less than 20 minutes. By the time the men left, $5,000 had been deposited into her account, and her property was officially booked for Saturday afternoon, exactly the same day and time her son's wedding was supposed to take place. She closed the door behind them and leaned against it, her heart racing. It was done. No turning back now. That evening, Maria stood outside watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. The wind carried the scent of jasmine from the garden. She could almost hear her late husband's voice in her mind, soft and steady as it used to be. "You always find a way, Maria," he would say when times were tough. She smiled faintly. Maybe she did. Maybe she always had. This time, it wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake, it was about self-respect. 4 years, she'd been treated like a servant in her own home, ignored, dismissed. It was time they learned who she really was. Inside, she made dinner for herself, a simple meal of rice and beans, and ate it in silence. There was no bitterness in her heart now, only a sense of justice slowly taking shape. She imagined David's reaction when he found out. At first shock, then panic, then anger, and finally, maybe understanding. He'd realized that his mother wasn't weak or naive. She was just quiet, And quiet people were often the ones you shouldn't underestimate. The next morning, her prediction came true. Her phone began to ring before breakfast. She looked at the screen. Jessica. Of course. Mrs. Ramirez. Jessica's voice was sharp, panicked. What is going on? The decorator says there's another event booked at the farm. They can't bring in the flowers. Maria took a slow sip of her coffee. Oh, that, she said calmly. Yes, I rented out the farm for a corporate event this Saturday. There was silence on the line. Then Jessica's shrill voice burst through. What? Are you out of your mind? That's our wedding day. Maria kept her tone even. I didn't know that, she said simply. No one told me. You can't be serious. Jessica snapped. Cancel it right now. I can't, Maria said. They've already paid in full. It's a binding contract. She heard Jessica gasp in disbelief. You can't do this to us. To us, Maria said softly. You mean to you? Because you did this to me first. There was silence again, and for a moment, Maria almost felt sorry for her, but only for a moment. Jessica began shouting, calling her selfish, cruel, ungrateful. Maria let her finish, then said gently, You should have asked, Jessica. That's all it would have taken. She hung up before the younger woman could respond. When the phone rang again 5 minutes later, it was David. His voice was full of frustration. Mom, why didn't you tell me you rented the farm? He demanded. Why didn't you tell me you were planning a wedding on my land? She countered calmly. There was a pause on the line. We were going to surprise you, he said weakly. Well, she replied, consider me surprised. His tone hardened. Mom, please, this is important to me. To us. Can't you cancel it? I'm sorry, David, she said, her voice soft but firm. It's too late. I signed a contract. They already paid. I can't break my word. He groaned. I'll pay you back whatever they gave you. Just cancel it. This isn't about money, she said quietly. It's about respect. There was another pause, longer this time. Mom, he began, but his voice cracked with helpless anger. She didn't reply. After a few seconds, he hung up. Maria stood by the window, looking out at the fields glowing under the sun, and whispered, Now you'll see what happens when you take your mother for granted. By the time David's car appeared at the end of the dirt road, Maria was already waiting on the porch. She had expected this visit. She could almost feel the vibration of anger rolling off the vehicle as it came closer. Jessica sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line of fury. When they stopped, David jumped out first, slamming the door so hard that the birds in the nearby trees scattered in fright. Mom, what the hell is this? He shouted, marching toward her like a man who believed the whole world owed him something. Maria stayed seated in her rocking chair, calm and steady. She didn't even blink. What are you talking about, David? She asked mildly. Don't play games, Mom. You know damn well what I'm talking about. You rented the farm out for some corporate party tomorrow, on the same day as our wedding. Jessica followed behind him, her voice sharp as broken glass. Do you have any idea what you've done, Hilda? 200 guests are expecting to come here. The decorations, the catering, everything was planned. Maria raised an eyebrow, her voice cool. Planned? Without me? David's face twisted. You're making this harder than it needs to be. We were going to surprise you, for God's sake. It was supposed to be a happy moment. Maria leaned forward slightly. A happy moment for whom? You. Jessica. Because it certainly wasn't for me. You made decisions about my home, my property, without even a phone call. Jessica scoffed. You're being dramatic. We weren't hurting anyone. It's family property. No, Maria interrupted sharply, standing now, her voice steady but full of restrained fire. It's my property. You didn't pay for this land, Jessica. You didn't work for it. You didn't live through 40 years of humiliation to buy it. I did. Her eyes locked onto Jessica's, and for the first time, the younger woman looked away. You've always been so controlling, Jessica muttered. Maybe that's why David never visits. You push people away. Maria's lips curved into a cold smile. And yet you both never fail to show up when there's something to take. Food, space, comfort. Not once have you come here just to help or spend time with me. David's anger wavered for a moment. Guilt flickered in his eyes, but he was too proud to admit it. "We didn't mean any harm," he said weakly. "We just assumed that I would say yes," Maria finished for him. "That I would obey like always." She folded her arms. "That's the problem, David. You don't see me as a person anymore. Just a servant who happens to be your mother." David rubbed his temples in frustration. "This is ridiculous. Just cancel the event. Please. We'll make it up to you." "I can't," Maria replied firmly. "The contract is signed, and I gave my word." "Then give them their money back," Jessica shouted. "You're really going to let your own son's wedding fall apart over a stupid piece of paper?" Maria's eyes hardened. "That stupid piece of paper represents something you both have never given me: respect. I told them they could use my farm, and I keep my promises." Jessica threw up her hands, pacing the porch. "You're insane. Everyone's going to think we're idiots. Do you want to humiliate your son in front of 200 people? Maria tilted her head slightly. "Oh, you mean like how he humiliated me when I found out about his wedding plans from a stranger?" That silenced them both. The only sound was the soft creak of the rocking chair behind her, moving slightly in the wind. David tried to soften his tone. "Mom, look, maybe we handled it wrong. I get that, but can't we just fix this? Please. It's one day. We'll pay you double, triple, whatever it takes." Maria shook her head. "This isn't about money, David. It never was. This is about me finally saying no." Jessica stepped closer, her voice trembling now with desperation. "You'll regret this. You're ruining our day." Maria looked at her evenly. "No, Jessica. I'm saving myself. For once in my life, I'm putting me first." Jessica's mouth opened to retort, but no words came. David clenched his fists, his pride and anger fighting against the helplessness creeping into his expression. "Fine," he said coldly. "Do whatever you want. But don't expect me to come back here again after this." Maria's eyes glistened, but her voice didn't waver. "That's your choice, David. Just remember, you left your mother because she stood up for herself, not because she did anything wrong." He turned sharply and stormed off, his shoes crunching against the gravel. Jessica followed, muttering under her breath, but not before giving Maria one last glare full of contempt. The car roared to life and sped off, leaving a cloud of dust behind. Maria stood there for a moment, watching until the road was empty again. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from release. For years, she had swallowed her words, endured every slight, every dismissal. Now she had finally spoken, and the silence that followed felt like freedom. She went back inside, closed the door gently, and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. Her heart ached, yes, but it also felt strangely light. Later that afternoon, Maria walked out to the garden again. The breeze carried the smell of fresh earth, and the sunlight danced through the leaves. She looked around at everything she had built, the farmhouse, the trees, the flowers, and realized that no matter what happened tomorrow, she had already won. The battle wasn't about weddings or contracts. It was about reclaiming her dignity. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. She was seen, if not by her son, then at least by herself. As she watered her plants, she whispered, "They'll understand one day. Maybe not now, maybe not soon. But they will." She smiled softly, her heart steady as the roots beneath her feet. Tomorrow would come, and with it, a lesson David and Jessica would never forget. Saturday dawned bright and warm, the kind of morning that should have been perfect for a wedding. But instead of a sound of laughter and celebration, Maria's farm buzzed with confusion and frustration. At precisely 2 p.m., several large black vans rolled up to the front gate. Men in suits stepped out, carrying boxes of equipment, speakers, and tables. The Golden Events Company had arrived right on schedule. Maria watched from the porch as they worked with efficient precision, setting up large tents, elegant white tables, and a stage covered in silver cloth. The workers hung banners with the logo of a multinational corporation, Global Tech Annual Leadership Summit, across her property. The sight filled her with quiet satisfaction. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. By 3 o'clock, the entire place looked unrecognizable. The open field where Jessica had imagined her floral wedding arch was now filled with rows of tables draped in silk and polished glassware. The old barn had been transformed into a private lounge for executives, complete with soft lighting and air-conditioned fans. Maria walked through the property, greeting the event coordinators politely. "Everything looks wonderful," she said. "Make sure to keep the main gate locked. We don't want any uninvited guests." Diego, the event manager, nodded without question. "Of course, Mrs. Ramirez. Security will handle that." She smiled. "Good. I trust you." Meanwhile, across town, David and Jessica were facing a nightmare. Guests had started arriving at the wrong address, their farm address. But instead of being welcomed by floral arrangements and a wedding arch, they found suited men carrying laptops and business folders. The valet turned them away politely, saying, "Sorry, ma'am, this is a private corporate function." Panic spread like wildfire. Jessica's phone buzzed nonstop with calls from confused relatives. "Where's the ceremony? Are we at the wrong place? The guards say there's no wedding here." By the time David and Jessica arrived, the front gate was surrounded by expensive cars and bewildered wedding guests holding gifts and flower bouquets. David jumped out of his car and stormed up to the gate, shouting, "Open this! This is my wedding!" But the security guard, following orders, shook his head. "Sorry, sir, this property has been rented for a private event. You're not on the list." "What are you talking about?" David fumed. "This is my mother's farm." The guard didn't flinch. "Then you'll have to speak to the owner." Jessica clutched his arm, her face pale. "David, everyone's watching. Do something." Maria, who had been standing on the porch, finally began walking toward the gate, her steps slow and deliberate. Her crisp white dress fluttered in the afternoon breeze as she approached. When the crowd saw her, the murmur quieted. David's face turned red. "Mom, what are you doing? Stop this madness right now." Maria stopped a few feet away from him, her expression calm and unshaken. "Good afternoon," she said evenly. "Is there a problem?" David looked like he was about to explode. "Of course there's a problem. You can't just hijack our wedding. People are standing outside in the heat. Cancel this ridiculous event." She raised an eyebrow. "Hijack? That's an interesting word. I believe the only hijacking that happened here was when you and Jessica decided to plan a wedding on my property without asking." The crowd went silent. Some of the guests looked away awkwardly, realizing what had really happened. Jessica tried to save face, forcing a smile. "Hilda, please, we made a mistake, okay? Let's just fix it. Cancel this event, and we'll move the wedding to the evening." Maria folded her arms. "There will be no wedding here today. My property is fully booked. Perhaps next time, you'll remember to ask before assuming you own it." David clenched his fists. "You're humiliating me in front of everyone." Maria's voice was firm but quiet. "No, David. You humiliated yourself. You disrespected me, and you taught your fiancé to do the same. You thought because I'm old I wouldn't fight back. You were wrong." Jessica's eyes welled with angry tears. "You're cruel," she whispered. "You're ruining the happiest day of our lives." "If your happiness depends on taking advantage of others," Maria said, "then it was never going to last." Her words were soft but cut deeper than any shout. As the confrontation went on, several company executives approached from behind her, politely asking if everything was all right. "Yes," Maria said with a graceful smile. "Just a little misunderstanding." The executives nodded and went back to their event, clearly impressed by her composure. To them, she wasn't a frail old woman. She was the owner of a beautiful estate and a professional partner in business. The contrast made Jessica's face twist with envy. "You really think you've won something?" she sneered. "You'll die alone in this empty house." Maria looked at her without blinking. "Better alone than surrounded by people who only remember me when they need something." At that moment, one of the guests, a distant relative of David, stepped forward hesitantly. "Mrs. Ramirez," he said softly, "we didn't know." "We're sorry." Maria smiled kindly. "It's not your fault, but I hope this teaches everyone something. Ownership means responsibility, respect. You don't take what isn't yours." The guests murmured in agreement. Some even gave her a small nod of respect before turning to leave quietly, embarrassed for David and Jessica. By evening, the farm was alive with music and laughter, but not from the wedding party. The corporate event was a grand success. Waiters served fine food, lights twinkled across the trees, and the air buzzed with energy. Maria stood on her porch watching it all unfold. For once, her property wasn't being taken for granted. It was being appreciated, admired, and paid for. She wasn't the help, the maid, or the background presence. She was the host, the respected owner. And that realization filled her heart with deep satisfaction. Meanwhile, miles away, David and Jessica sat in their car outside a closed banquet hall, trying to salvage what remained of their disastrous day. Their phones were full of unanswered messages, and half their guests had already gone home. Jessica stared out the window, her voice low and bitter. "Your mother just destroyed our wedding." David didn't answer. Deep down, he knew the truth. It wasn't his mother who destroyed it. It was his own arrogance. Back at the farm, Maria sat on her porch under the stars, the soft glow of the event lights shimmering in the distance. She felt peace for the first time in years. Not the peace that comes from silence, but the peace that comes from standing up for yourself and knowing you were right. As the night wind brushed against her face, she whispered to herself, 40 years of work, and finally they see me. The days following the failed wedding passed like a storm that had finally spent its rage. The gossip spread fast, through family, through neighbors, through social media. Videos of the confrontation at the farm had somehow leaked, filmed by a few curious guests. Within hours, the entire town was talking about how Maria Ramirez had outsmarted her own son and his fiancée, reclaiming her dignity and teaching them a lesson they would never forget. Some called her cruel, others called her brave. But for Maria, it wasn't about cruelty or heroism. It was about justice, about finally reminding those who had forgotten her worth that she was not to be used or ignored. For several days after the event, David didn't call. Neither did Jessica. The silence was almost louder than words. Maria didn't wait for them to apologize. She didn't expect it. She had learned long ago that true remorse only comes to those who have the courage to face their mistakes, and her son had never been good at that. She spent her mornings tending to her garden, watering her flowers, and talking softly to the soil like she always did. The tulips were blooming again, standing tall and proud, as if sharing in her victory. In the evenings, she would sit on her porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky gold and pink. It was the same view she had watched for 40 years, but now it felt different. It felt like freedom. Then one afternoon, she heard a car pull up outside. It was a familiar sound, the engine that had always meant her son was home. Maria's heart tightened, but she didn't move right away. She waited. A few moments later, David stepped out, looking nothing like the proud man from the wedding day. His clothes were wrinkled, his face pale and drawn. He walked slowly toward her, hesitating before speaking. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice thick with something between shame and regret. "Can we talk?" Maria didn't answer for a moment. She just looked at him, studying the lines of his face, the way his shoulders slumped. Then she nodded to the empty chair beside her. "Sit." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of the windmill. Finally, David broke the silence. "I don't know what to say," he began. "Jessica and we lost everything. The wedding's off. Her parents won't even talk to us. Everyone's laughing at us." His voice cracked slightly, but Maria remained silent. "I know you think I deserved it," he went on. "And maybe I did. But I didn't mean to hurt you like that. I thought it wouldn't matter. You've always given me everything. I didn't think using the farm for one day would be such a big deal." Maria turned to look at him, her eyes calm but piercing. "That's exactly the problem, David," she said softly. "You never think it's a big deal when it's me. You've taken from me your whole life, assuming I'll just give more. But respect doesn't work like that. Love doesn't mean permission to take advantage." David lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I really am. I just wanted to make her happy." Maria sighed. "You wanted to make yourself look successful. You thought my home would make you look important. You thought my work could be your decoration." Her words hung heavy in the air. David didn't argue. There was nothing left to defend. After a while, he looked up, his eyes red. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "But I didn't think you'd ever turn against me like that." Maria shook her head slowly. "I didn't turn against you, David. I turned toward myself. For the first time in years, I chose me. They sat there in silence again, both understanding that something deep had changed between them, something that could never go back to the way it was. When David finally stood up to leave, Maria didn't stop him. She watched as he walked back to his car, pausing once to glance back at her, perhaps hoping for one last look of forgiveness. But Maria simply smiled faintly and said, "Take care of yourself." It wasn't bitterness, it was closure. Weeks turned into months. Maria's story became something of a legend in the town. People spoke of her not just as a mother, but as a symbol of strength, a woman who had spent a lifetime giving and finally learned how to take back what was hers. The corporate event company continued renting her property regularly, and soon, Maria's farm became a well-known venue for high-end events. Her income grew, but more importantly, her confidence did. For the first time, people respected her for her mind, her organization, her discipline, not just her kindness. One evening, Maria stood in front of a mirror, adjusting a new silver necklace she had bought for herself. She barely recognized the woman staring back, a woman who no longer looked tired or forgotten, but proud and alive. The phone rang. It was Diego, the event manager. "Mrs. Ramirez," he said cheerfully, "we've just confirmed 3 new bookings for next season." "Congratulations." She smiled. "Thank you, Diego. It's a pleasure doing business with people who respect my work." That night, she walked outside to the field where it had all started, the same place where her son had once imagined a wedding that wasn't his to claim. The grass swayed gently under the moonlight, and the stars shimmered above. Maria closed her eyes, feeling the cool night breeze brush against her face. For the first time, there was no ache in her chest, no anger, no sadness. Only peace. She whispered to herself, "This land, this house, this life, they're mine, and I'm finally living it on my own terms." In the distance, the wind carried faint laughter from a nearby celebration. Another event happening on her land, this time with her blessing and her profit. It was poetic, almost healing. She thought of all the years she had been invisible, all the sacrifices she had made, and how it had taken one betrayal to finally open her eyes. Now, she wasn't invisible anymore. She was seen. She was heard. She was free. As she turned to go back inside, Maria looked up one last time at the sky and smiled, a small, quiet smile of victory. It wasn't revenge that satisfied her in the end. It was the realization that she had reclaimed her own story, and that, more than anything else, was worth every tear, every wound, and every lonely night she had endured.